Namaskar, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. I have with me Miss Cleo Paskal, one of my favorite people, to analyze what's happening in the world, especially focused with US, China, and the Indo Pacific. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be back.
I'm going to ask you a simple, straight question. Is the White House serious now about China? Last time we discussed um, the East, Central Pacific. We spoke about Fiji and multiple other islands, Guam and everything, where China is doing stuff. But this time, what we see is there is moves by the Americans to kind of block the Chinese BRI in Pakistan, Myanmar. Uh, Even Poland has stopped. By the way, Poland has stopped that corridor, which is going up. And there's a lot of quiet pressure by the White House to do that. So, do you think they're getting a little more serious, or is this just show play before the so-called Trump G summit?
It's really hard to tell because it depends on what you're tracking. So if you're tracking TikTok, for example, this hasn't been a good week or two on that front. And TikTok is it's a Chinese weapon. It's a Chinese information warfare weapon that's being continued that Congress tried to ban, and that India did ban, and that's going to be continuing. It seems if this deal is approved, it continues with Chinese involvement, and of course, according to the 2017 National Intelligence Law of China, any Chinese organization or individual has to support the Chinese intelligence state or operations. So on that front, I think that shook people quite a bit who are concerned about Chinese operations. But on the same time, sorry, you see the sort of thing that you're talking about, and a lot more activity going on in the Pacific Theater. I think people are waiting for the National Defense Strategy to come out, and that might give a bit of clarity. Also, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but Secretary Hegseth has summoned the flag officers to Quantico, and we don't know what's going to come out of that either. So there isn't the clarity that one might hope for, but they're also on both sides. You could see indications. The de facto U.S. embassy in Taiwan has made very clear statements around Taiwan, which don't support the Chinese narrative on it. So it's not just tea leaves; it's an entire tea shop that's been spilled out onto the ground, and you're kind of trying to pick your way through it. And sometimes you can see big clumps of tea, and sometimes you can see just little shreds. And I would definitely be lying if I told you I really knew what was going on.
Sorry.
It's okay. It gives me a chance to cough. Okay.
There was a report recently which Wall Street Journal or one of these lefty newspapers put it that the Americans now today want to not concentrate on the Asia front or the East Asia front, and rather focus on their uh, domain within the states and that entire region, the Americas, which was very interesting to me because that's like the Monroe Doctrine, kind of getting reestablished. Uh, I found it to be a little, I don't know, it was outlandish, for the lack of a better word, by saying that no, we are not interested to do anything with China and this and that. Is this a ruse again? Because this whole big meeting, Trump always kind of builds up to these meetings with Xi Jinping. Oh, there's a meeting. So they put out these little things. $400 million for Taiwan is banned. No, we don't want to give Taiwan $400 million. No, we want to kind of, the Taiwanese officials are not allowed here right now. So they've been giving out these like, kind of mixed signals. She is best friend and this and that. But there's also hits, sanction China and all that nonsense, which keeps happening. it's very mixed signals. How does he plan to even meet a world leader in this circumstance?
Again, I don't know. And I think that it's, so I just emailed you a map that gives some of a sense of the perimeter of the U.S., because the term that you keep hearing is hemispheric defense.
Yeah.
And which is, as you say, part of it's Monroe Doctrine, part of it is the manifestation of manifest destiny, and it includes a lot of the Pacific. So if you take a look at Guam, for example, Guam is part of hemispheric defense. And there is, like we talked about last time, there's this implicit understanding for, about, so this map, these are the extremities of the United States. So U.S. Virgin Islands in the east, Alaska in the north, American Samoa in the south, and then Guam and the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas in the west. Those are all U.S. territory with U.S. citizens. So and they joined the U.S. very deliberately. Either they were taken by the U.S. like Guam, or they voted to join the U.S. like in the Northern Marianas, or the chiefs had a treaty with the U.S. like in American Samoa. But the U.S. actually quite jealously guards a designation of something being part of the U.S. It's not, it's had a very checkered history, and especially like with the Philippines. But Congress in particular is not colonial friendly. And for example, with the Philippines, that was a big debate. People like Mark Twain were writing against the colonization of the Philippines, and it's fundamentally anti the image that the U.S. has of itself. So the fact that you've got those points in the extremities, and particularly the west and the southern extremity, those were very carefully thought through strategic statements of geography. And the Alaska Purchase, for example, in 1867, came just after the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War. And at the time, during the Civil War, there was a question of it, because at the time of the Civil War, what was north of the U.S. was a whole series, basically, of British colonies, possessions, some also like the Hudson Bay Company, manifestations like the East India Company. And the idea was on the side of Seward and potentially Lincoln, was if they bought Alaska and they had the west coast of the U.S., they could do a pincher move and grab those British territories on the west coast and control the entire western seaboard of North America. And so that same year, 1867, what became the Eastern Provinces of Canada confederated, and the Western British territories said, we'll join you if you can get British troops out to defend us from this American pincher move, which is why they built the Transcontinental Railway through Canada, to be able to get the British troops to the Pacific coast, which of course was also thereafter a way of getting British troops to India. Get the train across Canada, and then you can take the boat across the Pacific. But the point is that those markers, those geographic markers of the extremity of American terrain, shows what hemispheric defense has looked like to American strategists for 127 years. And it clearly includes the Pacific.
It does. I mean, you kind of brought it out, and see, you and I, whenever we've had conversations, we've always kind of hinted upon the World War II history about the Pacific, and that's something. That's the place that Americans actually fought. I don't think they fought in Europe as much, or at all, as a matter of fact. They fought mostly in the Pacific, and
they'll tell you about North Africa and D-Day and all of those. But anyway. But the Marines will tell you about the Pacific.
That's the war. People don't understand. If Americans have fought a war, that's the Pacific. And that's where I would say they fought an enemy that was strong, that was determined, and a very well matched enemy. So a lot of lives were lost, and that's one of the things that
100,000
yeah,
Americans died in the Pacific Theater.
yeah. So that's one of the things I fail to understand. Why is this place kind of, if you've spent so many lives, why is this place ignored so badly that they're
Well,
Pacific
I can tell you why. Because what happened was, so the U.S. Basically conquered the Pacific, and it had operational control across the whole area. And then when the war ended, it maintained control through the UN of what was called the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, which is the old Japanese mandate. So the U.S., what was between Hawaii and Guam, all those islands in the middle there, that belonged to Japan from 1914 until the U.S. took them during World War II. And then that also included Saipan and Tinian, which is just north of Guam. So it's the size of the continental United States in the middle of the Pacific that had been given to Japan after World War, or during World War I. Japan took it from the Germans. And then after World War II, it was given to the U.S. to administer. And that's the location where, for example, the U.S. did the 67 nuclear tests in the Marshall Islands. They ran CIA training operations in Saipan. It was a very active zone. It was first administered by the Navy, then the Department of Interior. Then the U.S. Had this issue because of this inner contradiction between not wanting to look like a colonial power, but not wanting to give up strategic control over this buffer in the center, or what I think of as America's geographical pivot of history. I don't believe that Mackinder's Eurasian landmass theory, heartland theory, applies to the U.S. I think for the U.S., the strategic geographical heartland is the center of the Pacific, because of the
Mackinder's theory applies to how the U.S. controls the world, not to the U.S. itself.
Well, I think it doesn't really affect the U.S. who controls the heartland. I think that, it was a British theory for a time before the Arctic was opened up, before technology improved. And it's a very European conceptualization of strategic priorities. And it took a while for the U.S. to kind of decolonize its strategic geography. And I think that, the old leaders like McKinley, or President McKinley, President Teddy Roosevelt, understood the role of the Pacific. That's why Roosevelt sent the Great White Fleet through the Pacific in 1907, 1908. That's why the Panama Canal was built. The geography, the core strategic geography of the U.S. is the center of the Pacific. So the question is, why have they ignored it? So the U.S. set up this Congress of Micronesia, where the representatives of those islands convened in Saipan, and over many years discussed what the future would be. And they were actually all offered to become part of the U.S. That what's now Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, Marshall Islands, were all offered to join the U.S., as was what's now the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas. And the leadership said, no, we've been colonized for hundreds of years. We want independence. First it was the Spanish, then it was the Germans, then it was the Japanese. They wanted to be independent countries. And the U.S. was like, we get it, but we can't have a hostile power launch from your territory and hit the U.S. So the way that they squared that circle was they went independent, but they signed this Compact of Free Association with the U.S., which allowed the U.S. strategic denial over that whole area. The U.S. provides budgetary support. The people of those places can live and work freely in the U.S. They serve in the U.S. military at very high rates, but they are independent countries. And the word free in free association is very important. They can break the relationship. And I think, frankly, the Chinese are on the ground doing their best now to try to break that relationship. But the point is for decades, the US didn't have to think about it because the deal worked. And they took it for granted. They talked about the first island chain and the second island chain without thinking about how do you get there, because that across the middle of how you get there was secured through these compacts of free association. And now they're being undermined.
Challenged. The interesting thing is China shifting eastward and America is coming in from the west, which is, ironical. They should have actually looked at their own territories first. Anyways, when you look at the deal with China and America today and the kind of politics which is happening on soya bean and corn and stuff, that is beginning to hurt. On top of it, you've got the tariffs in India. That is beginning to hurt as well, because a lot of you hear Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, the CEO of JP Morgan. He's come out and said this is stupid beyond anything else. JP Morgan is not a small guy. CEO of JP Morgan is a big person in the world. There is a lot of resistance within the US about what he's doing as well. But there is not going to be any stoppage. That's something that we all understand. I want to take a step forward to kind of look at his actions on a group of countries called BRICS, right? Out of which South Africa has been sidelined. I mean, he's just anti-Israel right now. But when you look at Brazil within his Monroe Doctrine over there, so you can see him kind of enforcing it down. China, Russia, and India is in focus pretty much every day. And he's become hostile with all three.
Yeah.
As people who, you've been involved in this process for a long time, and you've written, you've been involved in the decision-making processes. You've deposed in front of Congress as well. Yeah, so you know the system. What's happening here? I mean, isn't there any sort of strategic thought process, or is it just a women fancy that is taking stuff forward?
So the question is, are we, who are we talking about? Are we talking about President Trump or Lutnick or MAGA or, kind of, because there's a lot of different things going on at the same time.
Yeah, I want to come to that, and then we will kind of come to MAGA and stuff like that. So let's just talk about policy people first.
So I think that it's very, this might sound trite, but I don't think it is. I do think this is one of many factors. One of many factors is that I do think President Trump wants to go down in history as a peacemaker, which is why he claims to be bringing peace to places where he may not have actually been the main factor in brokering peace, right? And his repeated election campaign promise was to end the war in Ukraine in a day, or, and that it wouldn't have happened if he came. And I think that just personally, the fact that this hasn't been resolved is something that is very troubling to him. And he talks repeatedly about the thousands of people dying every week. And it's likely he's things affect. It's similar to how he talks about October 7th. When people try to bring up whatever you can see he remembers seeing the videos of what happened on October 7th. And he remembers talking to the parents of the hostages, and he brings it up. And I think that the death, apart from everything else, the deaths bother him. The fact that he hasn't been able to solve it bothers him. And I think that was part of what is, I think, potentially definitely a missed opportunity for improving relationships with India, and damaging of the relationship with India, just because he was so laser focused on trying to figure out, or trying to do what he thought would affect the Russians. Now, as you know, it's the Chinese that are buying more oil than India, so it doesn't really make sense that the focus would have just been on India. And I don't know whether he, was dialing it back on China. There could be a bunch of different reasons for it. Whether he thought, the India-US relationship could take it, or whether he's getting badly briefed. I don't know what it was, but what I initially saw around the language, around, like, people would say, "What are you doing about solving the Russia problem?" And he would answer, "I'm putting tariffs on India," right? So in his mind, and we're talking about different people involved in, and I don't think he was getting great advice on this at all, but that instinctive reaction to answer that question in that way implies to me that that's a big part of what he was doing when he was, putting these tariffs on India, was in his mind, it seems, linked, at least in large part, to the Russia thing. Now, there's a lot of other things going on here. There's what we know about the crypto deals with Pakistan, with the family. There's why, if that's the case, then why isn't he pushing on China? Is it because he's trying to do something else with China at the same time? Although we're starting to see that thing with China shift. And what's very frustrating for me, as somebody who's been following India a little bit for a while, is that there's a lot of people don't read the Indian media. And so the Western media doesn't report things well. So around the SCO meeting and the parade meeting, people, even in the think tanks that I'm involved with, they weren't sure whether Prime Minister Modi would go to the parade. Like, it was a question for them, even though, that had been announced. But I'm telling you, this is something that we've talked about before, that it's difficult to understand how little people know or talk about India in DC. And so, those of us who are as educated as an 8-year-old in India, that's basically my geopolitical understanding of India, is like an 8-year-old, right? You could tell you, no, he wasn't going to go to the parade. And not only did he not go to the parade, but he came to the SCO meeting from Japan. So that you see that signaling, but that signaling isn't getting highlighted and repeated. And this goes to this secondary assessment, which is there are a lot of people and a lot of lobbies who benefit from creating problems with the US-India relationship, including people that are fronting for China or Russia or France or any of the other ones that would benefit from creating even more division between the US and India. And they're all very active and well funded in the think tank community in DC.
The funny thing is, you're absolutely right. They just don't know how India works. And the stupid, and I don't know how to term it, but Lutnik and all these monkeys going on about Russian oil, embarrassing themselves, because we speak to a lot of Americans. I speak to a couple of Americans on podcasts. I speak to people personally as well. So when you tell them that, listen, you know what, you guys are buying oil from us. What? That's the reaction. And the same reaction I had from you when I told you, listen, we are selling oil to Ukraine.
Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah. But I know that the US is buying uranium from Russia.
Yeah.
But
that's okay. You can look that way. India is selling oil to Ukraine.
Yeah.
We don't have our own oil. It's Russian oil that Ukrainian tanks are running on right now. How much more hypocritical can this situation get? And the point is that everybody on the street who matters in India knows this.
They must be 9. They must be 9 years old, because us 8-year-olds have to. We have to hear it from the 9-year-olds.
Saying that, I'm not saying that, but that's
no, but it's true.
Which brings me to MAGA.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
MAGA is, what's up with this whole thing? They seem to be an animal of their own. It was created by Trump and Bannon and all these guys.
So
and now
it's MAGA is, so there are many different MAGAs, and and what we're seeing now is, and MAGA isn't just MAGA, and this is why the Charlie Kirk assassination is having such tremendous reverberations. Charlie Kirk was the one that brought together MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, and MAGA. He was the one that arranged the meeting between Robert F. Kennedy and Trump, and the announcement of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joining or supporting Trump happened at a Turning Point event. And so there's a whole the constellation of interests or supporters of, I mean, it's beyond, it's not just MAGA. It's, you know, the people that put Trump in office. It's a very unusual but very broad coalition, and parts of it, for example, were very put out by the bombing of Iran. They really didn't like the bombing of Iran, and you started to see sections of it that became quite anti-Semitic, sort of vocally anti-Semitic. It's sort of, well, actually, some of it was anti-Semitic, and some of it was a concern that it wasn't America first, it was Israel first, and that Israel had set up the US for the bombing of Iran. But then that devolved quite quickly into anti-Semitism. In small sectors. I'm not saying this is dominant at all, which is why it's worth explaining how important Charlie Kirk was, because Charlie Kirk would go to university campuses, and he would have these prove me wrong sessions where he would just talk to anybody about anything. And he was he was evangelical Christian, but not they're different. That takes different forms. And he was just very comfortable in who he was and in his beliefs. And it was a pride, not a prejudice, if you know what I mean. So it was a very big tent. He had a very big tent. And he would bring in all sorts of people from, Ben Shapiro to Tucker Carlson, who had very differing views on a lot of things, but give them all space to talk and challenge each other. And for people in university, that's one of the most exciting things, right? Okay, here's a place I can actually play with ideas. I won't get canceled. I won't get shut up. If I can prove my case, then that's the goal. If I can't, then I can refine my arguments and my thoughts. And he would have long arguments with the students, including about things like how useless a university education can be, and how So it was and of course I don't agree with everything he had to say, and that's what he wanted. But
I was pretty anti-India, but that I don't think that he deserves to be killed for that.
Yeah, and he's very, and it's very difficult. I mean, just before the assassination, he was in South Korea, and he was in South Korea out of concern over basically Chinese takeover of the South Korean state. Kind of leftist, which is a whole other topic. And at his memorial service, Elon Musk and Donald Trump sat next to each other after all of this, and that's very typical of what Charlie Kirk could do. Sort of bring together people and have them find what they had in common more than what divided them. And he was particularly good at the political ground game of bringing in new voters and finding, low propensity or no propensity voters, getting them signed up, getting them to the polls. And it was having an enormous effect with the youth, which is what's petrifying to the Democratic Party, because they used to own the youth. Either the youth vote would be left wing or it wouldn't vote. And here is an organization that was finding conservative voters and registering them and getting them to the polls. And so that meant that the future, not just actually, that was scary to a lot of traditional Republicans too, because it meant that the future of the Republican Party was much more Trump than Romney, which is also very threatening. Yeah.
The polarization within the US is, I mean, as long as I know, I've never seen it like that. Even in the 60s, 70s, when it was, the race riots and the Martin Luther King movement and the civil rights movement, it wasn't one against the other. It was for a better future. So there was rioting and this and that, but everybody kind of understood, okay, fine, they're doing it for this, and it was required. The war in Vietnam was taking loads of lives, and so there was a discontent. Right now, it's not discontent, which I see in America. Right now, I see rage.
Well, it's not it's okay. There's a few different things there, but one of them is you'll notice that the response to the Kirk assassination on the right was not rioting. It was.
It happens. Even in India, we keep saying this. You morons on the right, what the hell are you doing? Get up, wake up. The left comes on the street and does all sorts of nonsense. We don't.
No, and what they're doing, the response is organizing. So what they've, and it's what, so this Turning Point organization has, it's a campus-based organization. So it has chapters in universities and high schools, and they've had tens of thousands of requests for new chapters. I mean, much, much more than Charlie Kirk had ever anticipated could be possible as a result. Now, these are kids, right? These are high school students. They might lose interest in a week or two, but they also might not. And a big part of what the Charlie Kirk's thing was advocating for getting married and having a family.
I appreciated his thoughts in that, basically the family values and stuff like that. I mean, I didn't really appreciate the fact that everything was religiosity within, more than the street value of things. It was more religious. Honestly telling you, he would have reached a lot more people if he didn't do the religious part, because then you're being a little more inclusive in the game. But I don't think he wanted to.
No, that what motivated him was his faith. And the result has been a visible increase in people going to church. And for him, the family, the faith was the marriage and the family was what the Bible tells you to do. I mean, and it's not, and it's a very specific sort of. I mean, there's a quote that his wife referenced from the Bible about, the husband serving the wife, and in the same way that you would, serve the church. I can't exactly remember the quote, but it informed his daily decision. He wouldn't act. He observed the Sabbath on Saturdays. He wouldn't answer the phone, for that 24 hours. It was, dedicated to his family. The faith was very much a part of, which is part of why you saw, I don't know if you saw the celebration of life, what they call it. I mean, so the wife's statement, Erica Kirk's statement about forgiving the man who murdered her husband, and about him being the sort of young man that her husband was trying to reach, a lost young man. That's who Charlie Kirk was trying to reach, to say, you don't have to be an angry, lost, left-wing, confused guy. There is a place for you in society, but you have to in Charlie Kirk's view of what that place was, it was, kind of very traditional, what used to be normal sort of way of living. You join your community and you have a family, you get married, and you serve to lead, if that's the kind of the way you do it. A leader is somebody who serves, which is very much what you hear, for example, in military circles, also very kind of typical. So that's why the response for those who truly understood the message of Charlie Kirk and Turning Point hasn't been rioting. It hasn't even kind of really been anger or sadness. It's what in the Christian context is called revival, and it is transformational. This is probably the most important political assassination since Martin Luther King, of a non-political figure, of somebody who isn't elected, an elected office. And what it'll mean in particular, we'll see during the midterms, because Trump's polling numbers have gone up about 10 points since this happened, because a lot of people who were saying, who didn't like some of the things that Trump was doing, like I mentioned with the Iran thing, are saying we've got way bigger problems. And we need to deal with it. And the designation of Antifa as a terrorist organization, is also going to be quite important, because I think they'll start following some of the money trails, and it'll be interesting to see where they lead. I suspect they may lead to some of the places that have been causing the same sort of problems for India, actually.
But that's hardcore polarization, which is obviously going to happen. There's no question. And
is it polarization, or is it a society under attack by a specific extremist element?
Oh, I'm not saying that in a negative way, by the way.
Uh-huh.
I'm not saying that polarization in a negative way. A lot of people kind of take polarization in a negative way, but polarization, if it's not going to happen, then how does the group get together and kind of resist the other side who's been unfair in terms of forget anything else, but just listening. There's just no understanding or listening from the other side that anybody gets. For example, I'll just tell you, in India, it's as simple as that. Either you are kind of, in no simple words, either you are with these guys or you're an idiot. That's it. So if somebody from the right, or sorry, the left wants to kind of come into the right, he's welcomed in towards the right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's welcomed. Oh, come. It's all right. Oh, history is history. That's okay. Chill out. That's the kind of a message that is given. But from the right, if he wants to go to the left, what is, what he gets to hear? See, we told you, they're idiots. So, and that polarization needs to happen, because if the world order and the game in the world, which was, terribly left for some reason, which went terribly left for some reason, if that needs to change and come back to common sense politics, not the right, but common sense politics, well, you know what?
Are you starting to see the same? So, because if you take we're starting to learn more about these. I don't know if you're following. Like, there was a shooting at another kid shot. He was trying to shoot ICE officers, immigration officers, but he shot detainees. But when you start, what becomes kind of clear when you see more of their profiles is they spend an enormous amount of time online. And there seem to be problems specifically in Reddit, Discord, specifically, but some other, TikTok obviously is.
Oh, you see what happened in Nepal? They used what you call Discord, and look what happened. The entire thing took off. They literally, and they for some time the entire gang was proud of um, actually, proud of selecting their prime minister on Discord. So it's like, yeah, you're wondering, boss, hello, can you kind of can we get into, and I keep saying this, common sense politics. I mean, we need to get to common sense where you're looking at the country's interest, you're looking at societal interests. It's not just a group of people that are saying, we want everything, you can go to hell. And that's what we see with the LGBTQ crowd and stuff like that, which is my way or the highway. There is no middle path with these people.
Yeah, I think, I suspect what we're seeing is obviously the more extremist elements of the community that get then, increasingly radicalized and activated by online sources, and some of them may not be organic. They may be being cultivated and radicalized deliberately, and I hope that's a little bit of what we'll see if they start looking into some of the Antifa stuff, for example. I know that now that it's designated, they can track the money, but I think they can also track some of the online activity. But we'll see. I mean, I don't know if it's the as and what you're seeing from the outside is these fits and starts in U.S. foreign policy, but on the inside, the actual kind of civil war is happening within the institution. So they just had these indictments against Comey. They came out, the report that said there were, whatever it was, 275 FBI ununiformed officers at January 6th. You're starting the shutting down of U.S. Institute for Peace, and some of the videos that have come out from their training manuals. USAID getting shut down. There's a very active what Bannon calls the dismantling of the administrative state attempts going on at the same time internally. So it's very much like it's not even a work in progress. It's like a kind of roiling river. Very difficult to know what rocks are going to get thrown up, or what sea monsters are going to emerge, what planes are going to get flooded. It's every day something new comes out that you can't, that you for me, I just need to sit down and go, what just happened? What does it mean? We're used to connecting dots, but now it's very hard to know who's drawing those dots. And so, is it all one pattern, or is it several patterns laid over the top of each other? And what do you? That's it.
Lastly, I want to ask you about.
Sorry.
No. This is very interesting because we're also trying to figure out what's happening in this country. It's a country which is important in the world. So one just wants to understand how the place is going to work in the future. As far as policy is concerned, and I want to swing back to this whole meeting that is being called by Pete Hegseth and everything, where you see activity in Venezuela, you see activity in Iran, you see activity in Russia. Is okay, fair enough. I mean, that'll be stupid if they do something there. And of course, the China front, which is pretty important for them. What is happening as far as military posturing is concerned? We see the Navy right now focused towards the Middle East more than anything else. And they say, there's a good old saying, right? If you want to know what the US is going to do, look where the Navy is.
Mm-hmm.
Today I see the Navy in front of Venezuela and Iran.
Yeah. So I was just in Honolulu. One of the reasons why I'm a little under the weather is I had the pleasure of the travel from Honolulu to DC, which involves several overnight flights. And there is an active discussion and ramping up of concern over logistics, and as you know, yeah, I mean, you look where the ships are, but if you're really serious about something, you try to solve problems around logistics. And I think they're real, the realization that the center of the Pacific, which had been taken for granted for so long, is now being compromised through political warfare operations, is maybe not going to be as stable as you think it is. But this is, they're building divert airfields. The agile deployment stuff is starting to kind of slowly come online. So they're looking at the infrastructure that's needed. My concern is that certain parts of the U.S. military see it as much more urgent than others. And it would be more reassuring to see a lot more urgency to it. We're still dealing with this situation. We talked about last time the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, which is part of the U.S. It's just north of Guam, and they still let Chinese arrive without a visa. And the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Insular Affairs at the Department of Interior, which is the position, that's a political appointee position. The person in that position oversees the relationship with the Marianas, with Guam, with Palau, with Marshalls, Federated States of Micronesia, that whole zone. That guy, when he's from the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, and when he was running for the legislature there, he took campaign money from Chinese companies, which is illegal. But in the FEC, the Election Commission said it was illegal, but it had passed the statute of limitations, so they didn't charge him. But he still got the position now where he is the face of the U.S. government in the engagement with these strategically crucial places. Now, how is he still in that position? So, you could put in your fuel bunkers, but when the Deputy Assistant Secretary who's wandering around doing the negotiations with those locations is somebody who took Chinese money, you got to wonder what the sense of urgency actually is and how joined up the policy is. So I don't, and it's not, this has been Daily Signal did an article about this guy. And the woman that represents the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas in the U.S. Congress is right now actively pushing for a lifting of the cap on direct flights from mainland China into the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas and Guam. She wants unlimited flights on Chinese carriers to be able to come into the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas and Guam. And nobody's, some people are writing about it, but nobody seems to be doing anything about it. So it's
if I may, these viruses are everywhere.
Yeah.
Even in India, I mean, it's not funny when people just don't realize what they're saying, and what they're doing.
She absolutely. I mean, she thinks that the salvation for the local economy is Chinese tourism. So no visas for Chinese and direct flights for Chinese, even though she has ample information available at her fingertips as a member of Congress for why that's a problem and how there are other options. So getting back to what we talked about initially, right at the beginning, 100,000 Americans died because this zone, the Central Pacific, is the launch spot for if a hostile power controls it, and it could be during the history of the U.S., it's been the Spanish, it was the French, it was the Germans, it was the Soviets, it was the Japanese. It's geography. It's given the geography, it's always going to be someone. Now it's the Chinese. So they devised this very elegant solution, which seemed to satisfy all the conditions, and then they stopped paying attention to it. And now the Chinese are using political warfare to emplace in a civil military fusion fashion in the same way that the Japanese did in the 20s and 30s, in the same locations, sometimes literally the same airfields. And, and the Marines that are sitting on Honolulu are looking at this going, we know this story. We don't like this story. But meanwhile, somebody in DC thinks it's a good idea to take somebody who is taking Chinese money to be a front man for the U.S. administration in the region. And it could be for narrow political reasons. I don't know why. But the point is, you think you're in India and you go, I don't understand why the U.S. is treating us like this. Well,
the U.S. is treating itself.
The U.S. is treating itself like this. So, and at the same time, it's got all of these different things going on internally, and we'll see what happens with the midterms. It's an interesting time to be alive.
I've started actually noting down stuff, because I started keeping a track when I said what, because in the next 6 months, I'll be able to make a chronology of madness.
That's right. That's a good idea.
Yeah. I've actually started doing that in the past 3 days.
Okay. Yeah, so, I don't think it's going to take 6 months. It might take 6 weeks at the rate things are going now.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure talking to you. I think this was a very unusual talk between us. We've covered a large paradigm of things, especially US politics, which is interesting to everybody in the world. So thank you for putting your insights. It's always a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you. Thanks for putting up with me.
No, not at all. It's always a pleasure. And to the audience, as usual, please like and subscribe. And of course, if you can, do contribute towards the channel. Show your love. Till then, start.